Last summer, I spent a bit of time diving at Talland Bay. Here's the footage. The water was so clear at Talland Bay. We had a steady 10 to 12 metres viz, and it was just awesome seeing some of the fish underwater. There were stacks of bait fish just shimmering in the shallows, and I felt pretty confident there'd be a lot of bass. I was on this trip with Bobby Burns, and he's really good at diving in the aguato or stalking technique. He gets a lot of fish that way. It's probably my weakest style of hunting, so I was quite determined to practice a bit of it. And you can see me here just gliding over the kelp at 10 metres, and I had to adjust my weighting a bit for this. I had a weight vest and a weight belt, and that meant I could drop sometimes 2.5 kilos of weight. Now you can see here some good sized bass moving over this sand patch, and this is a really good example of how not to do it. So I dive down here straight onto where the bass are and basically spook all of them away. Then I drop down right to the edge of this open patch, and that means I've got very limited visibility anywhere, and it's basically just a really poor example of of exactly what not to do. Now what I should have done is this. You see the bass there? I should have looped over to the right, and there was a large rock to the right, so I could have gone down underneath that rock, popped up on top of the rock, then I've had a good field of view over the entirety of the gravel patch, and I probably could have shot a bass. Shortly after this, I got pretty lucky, to be honest. I was just diving down and a bass kind of appeared out the kelp. I had a really long look at this fish, decided it was in size, and took the shot. Wasn't a particularly impressive bass, but it was good to get off the mark. Now, I went back to what I'm much better at, which is just Beto. I've always had a pretty decent breath hold, and here what I'm really trying to do is bury myself into the kelp. See myself, bring myself forwards to ensure that the whole of my body and my fins are hidden. And shortly after this, a lone bass just cruised into view. Could probably only really see my gun and my goggles. I'm pretty well hidden here. This is a much better example of decent spearfishing. And this bass just cruises in. I wait for it to turn and present with a side-on shot and take it. Not a massive fish, but you know, a perfectly good size, and myself and Bobby enjoyed this on the campsite. Later that evening we fried it up as a Dutch couple actually lent us their camping stove, which was much better than my £5 screw-on stove. There's some quite nice meals from their stove. And after shooting 2 bass, it was time to look for something else. I'd noticed a few mackerel zooming around, hunting all those bait fish, and I thought I might try and get one. I'd never shot a mackerel before. And I get a bit excited. I see this shoulder of mackerel coming by, and I swing the gun around way too quickly, spook the first one. Another mackerel comes in, I wait for that side-on shot, and nail it. It was really satisfying shooting a mackerel. I've actually not often seen mackerel when I was spearfishing. You don't see them a lot off North Wales. It might just be the marks that I dive. There are a lot of mackerel there because you catch them on feathers, but I think a lot of the time the mackerel are in deeper water than what I'm spearing in. When I've been out on boats with mates, we've often been maybe jigging feathers in 20 or 30 metres of water, and the mackerel are halfway down, whereas obviously you're never going to spear in those sort of conditions. But I do love eating mackerel. I think they're one of the most beautiful fish we've got in the UK. Just that lovely green colour, the perfect black stripes. You know, really cool sort of fish. One thing that really surprised me about Cornwall was just how few fish there were. In North Wales, you dive down and there's wrasse, there's small pollock everywhere. At Talland Bay, there were so few fish, and that really surprised me. And maybe at other tide states or other times of day there's more fish, but when I was there, it just seemed like a very barren kind of environment. I saw very few pollock. The terrain looked really good for them. Deep, rocky gullies, big boulders, tall kelp, but there were so few pollock, and I really didn't see a lot of bass. And really, the first session was just scratching out a few fish, just seeing what I could get. My second session at Talland was a bit different. I did most of this session without a dive watch. I deliberately took the dive watch off just to kind of see the difference, and what was so fascinating was how much better my breath hold was without the dive watch. Now, this trip to Cornwall had been marred quite significantly because my ex-girlfriend was pretending to be pregnant, and the stress of that was genuinely really affecting my breath hold. And this session I just managed to kind of put it all out of my mind, forget about it completely, and just enjoy the diving. You can see here spending quite a long bottom time. Now most of my dives on this session, looking back at the footage from the GoPro, were well over 2 minutes, and that really surprised me because normally my dives are between kind of 1 minute 15 and 1 minute 45 depending on the style, but for it to increase that easily without the dive watch was fascinating. Now I did notice the bass at Talland were very spooky. They quite often look at you, see the spear, and then just suddenly bolt like those two. And I can only assume that's because the mark gets absolutely hammered. There's a lot of spearos there. And this is an example of a bass shoal that didn't spook, but I was on the bottom for 1 minute 45 before shooting the bass in this clip, so that's a dive time of not far short of 2 minutes 15. It was absolutely fascinating just how much difference it made not thinking about my dive times at all. It really helped. There's no pressure, and you can see here 2 minutes, what's that, 2 minutes 6 on the watch there, and yeah, just not thinking about the breath hold at all really helped. This is quite a cool clip here. So you'll watch a bass kind of cruising, and you watch me miss what looks like a ridiculously easy shot. But after I miss this bass, we'll play the clip in slow motion and you can see what really happens. So sometimes you think you've just made an awful shot, but one of the benefits of having the GoPro filming is see what really happens. Now this bass does a move like Neo out the Matrix. It's quite incredible. Just I'm about to shoot, it just accelerates away and escapes. So good effort to that bass. Now this is an example of poor shooting. There's no excuse for missing this fish. Now I think what happens here is I get the gun sort of almost stuck on this bit of kelp I'm hiding behind, and I just shoot over the fish. You see it turns here, presents the broadside, and I shoot over the top, and looking back at this footage you can see I just miss it. Now I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do like and subscribe. It helps me out. It helps this content reach more people.